welcome to Healthcare Triage Live. I'm assuming we're up. We're just going to go with it, as always. Thank you so much for turning in. We're excited to be able to pull this off every week. As always, I want to just do a little bit of housekeeping. People are continuing to join our Facebook page, facebook.com/healthcaretriage. Great place to see all the videos and share them and do everything else you might like to do. The Reddit community is only getting larger, reddit.com/r/hctriage. See, I knew it this week. I didn't have to just guess. And of course, patreon.com/healthcaretriage. We continue to get more and more patrons and support. We really appreciate that. We're very excited about it, and it's going to allow us to do bigger and better things like have a mic that works. Let's get right to it. We'll get started right away. Question number 1 comes from Sikkim. Could you guys cover some of the myths concerning chiropractic benefits? And you put benefits in quotations. You've covered supplements a lot, and that's great, but I'd love to hear evidence for or against other commonly touted cures. The problem with talking about most of this stuff is there are not a lot of good randomized controlled trials for chiropractic. And of course, if we only do observational studies, those are going to be incredibly biased and flawed because, of course, the people that choose to use a chiropractor are going to get significant amount of placebo effects from it. So only by doing randomized controlled trials or even better controlled prospective trials in some way, can you get them closer to truth about whether there are actually any benefits caused by getting chiropractic care. Almost every single one of those studies fails to show any benefit. And that's a problem because if we want to get insurance to cover things like that, then you would like to see some benefit. Because you have to realize when you use insurance money, you're using other people's money, not just your own, and people get very squirrely about paying for stuff that doesn't actually work. So I know we've covered supplements. That's often because there's actually some trials with those. There just really aren't with chiropractic care. But you know what? We'll look into it. And we will try to find and see if there's any research. And if there is, we'll put together an episode on it because it's certainly something people ask for a lot. Which reminds me, I should have said at the beginning, as with always, nothing I say or do during this broadcast should be construed as medical advice. Even though I am a doctor, and many of you have pointed out to us in questions, I am allowed to give out medical advice. I don't know you. And I can't see you, and I can't do a physical exam or take a history, and so I can't tell what you're allergic to or what issues you might have or why there might be contraindications for certain things for you as an individual. So I can't give you medical advice over a YouTube show. That's just not going to happen. So don't take anything I say as medical advice. You should always talk to your doctor before deciding to do anything. Question number 2, Lily CP01, is there a significant risk of long-term damage from Raynaud syndrome? That is very specific. So Raynaud syndrome is and I'm going to actually read it off here because I looked this up because I know what it is, but I don't want to screw it up. It's a rare secondary laminopathy consisting of a combination of cirrhosis and sclerosis. So you got some liver disease there and some issues. Laminopathy is an issue of some of the tissues in your body. It's been associated with other things. It's not terribly common. People get jaundice. They have other laboratory values that are related to liver dysfunction. They can have some issues with the skin, and they can have some itching as well. It can cause white or yellowish spots in the arms or legs, and some of it actually can become scleroderma, which is another sort of tissue disease. The bottom line is, I think it probably does have some long-term implications. I mean, biliary cirrhosis is not a good thing. And so absolutely you would want to talk to your doctor. You got to be careful not to confuse this with Raynaud's phenomenon, which is much more common. And that's when people with cold or emotional stress have strange amounts of blood flow or problems, and actually you get discoloration of the finger, toes, or other areas with cold or with stress. And that can often be not really a big deal. And so people can often ignore that a lot of the time. But as always, you should check with your own physician. But if you're asking me specifically about, are there significant risks of long-term damage? I would say possibly. And I would certainly want to talk to your doctor if you've absolutely been diagnosed with Raynaud syndrome. Naveed Kaushal says, I've had a lot of acne on my back and chest. Can you explain why some get acne and others don't? What sort of preventive measures can be taken to reduce the amount of acne I have? So there's a lot of myths about acne, and a lot of people think it has to do with diet. A lot of people think it has to do with cleanliness. It's a combination of things. It's a clogging of ducts for the most part. And sometimes it has to do also with there's bacterial infection or bacteria, which can make things worse or better. Most of the medication that is used for it it dries things out, which just sort of prevents sort of the accumulation of the stuff that you get inside of zits. Some people are on antibiotics for their acne, for certain types of acne. Antibiotics, some of them have, especially the tetracyclines, appear to do a decent job. Some people are on longer-term medication like Raynaud or things like that, even though that can have a lot of other issues and side effects. So you certainly want to talk to your doctor first. Some people use things like benzoyl peroxide or a lot of the washes, which are astringents, and they sort of dry you up and bring everything down. Why do some people get it and some don't? Sort of bad luck. Sorry, just the big engine just went off and I got distracted. It's sort of just luck. It's just some people do and some people don't. Some people get it on their back, some people get it on the face. Certainly, it appears to be hormonally related in some ways, in which kids who are going through puberty seem more likely to have worse acne, and some women, depending upon their cycle, actually notice acne at different times. And so it is somewhat related to hormones. It is somewhat related to just whether or not you're predisposed to get it. There are better medications now than there were decades ago. And so it feels like we've got a little bit better control. And for super severe cases of acne, there are more powerful drugs that people do try these days than there have been in the past. So talk to your doctor. If you have acne, which is really bothering you, it's very likely that there probably are some medications you have not been using that you could try. So there you go. Flying Beagles, your episode on artificial sweeteners reminded me of the demonization of MSG flavor enhancer 621. What does the research say about the health effects of frequent MSG consumption? So, there are some people who are allergic or have sensitivity, to MSG, and they obviously have issues. But MSG got a huge rap for a while, and it started being taken out of all kinds of food or whatever. MSG is like pure umami. So when we talk about the various types of flavor, it's the mysterious fifth flavor. It's like earthy. And MSG is basically in its purest form. So I think unfortunately this was like everything else. It was one of those things which got in epidemiologic studies was shown to be associated with various things, but over time, more prospective trials or other issues haven't really borne this out. And so MSG, I think, has probably been creeping back in. I've noticed, years ago, everybody used to demand that their Chinese food and other food be free of MSG. These days, I don't see people asking for that anymore. Whether that's because MSG has been totally, removed, or because MSG is just not scary anymore, I don't know. But other countries, I don't think, have reacted in the same way as we did here to a lot of the MSG concerns. And so but people use it because it tastes good. It's one of those things that when added to food makes it incredibly flavorful. And so people do notice the MSG. And I think probably it has been creeping back in. Fun fact, ketchup is actually one of the few foods that has all 5 flavors. And I think there are lots of people that believe that's why so many kids love ketchup so much. Because it has like all 5 of those flavors, including umami, and it just makes every taste bud go crazy. There's a phenomenal Malcolm Gladwell article on it. You should go read it. Next question, Patreon user. Yay! We're very happy whenever our Patreon people, our patrons are really submitting questions, and we try to get to them. This is from Shane Medella. Are there any health risks related to consuming moderate levels of diet soft drink beverages? I know aspartame doesn't have long-term effects on health, but what about other ingredients in diet sodas? There's, as I wrote before, there's really no evidence of that at all. And in fact, I'm sitting here drinking a diet soda right now. And so, when you're drinking like moderate levels of the stuff, there just haven't been any conclusive issues that would make you want to avoid it. Now, of course, with any beverage, you can prove a damage. Like, they'll do the things where they'll put teeth and they'll soak it and the teeth will get destroyed. It's like everybody's favorite science fair project. But of course, I bet if you put teeth in orange juice, they would also erode. If you put teeth in probably many things, they would erode. And that's why it's important to brush your teeth after you eat. And so all things other than water probably have some detrimental effects if we drink too much of them and we don't take care of our teeth. So that would be, the kind of thing where it's like, it's not that everything is harmless, but it's always a question of, is it more or less harmful than other stuff? And there's really not a lot of good evidence that diet soft drinks or sodas in general or diet sodas in general are really that unhealthy for you. People get worried that there's a damage to the bones. That does not bear out in studies. People get concerned that there's damage with respect to phosphorus or calcium, and that does not bear out in studies. And there are people that are worried about whether they screw up diabetes or everything else. And again, there are associations and epidemiologic studies which make people slightly concerned. They're just not borne out often in the large randomized controlled trials. And again, you're always weighing it against other things. Is it more or less concerning than water? But I'd rather you drink that than, again, sugar beverages. And that's where the real problem is. Moreover, everything in life has a benefit or a risk. And all of these diseases we talk about, diabetes, Alzheimer's, they have tons and tons of risk factors and things which will raise or lower the potential risks of you getting it. And all of these things contribute in small ways to bad or good health. And some of them are huge impact, like smoking, major impact. And so, of course, that's why there's such a huge focus on let's get rid of smoking tobacco. But there just don't seem to be the huge effects from all these other things. Is there a greater than zero harm? Possibly. Is it enough that you should probably be panicked about it and eliminate it from your diet? For the vast majority of people, unlikely. It's probably less of a harm or danger to you than many other things you do every day, and you don't consider that at all. I use the same example all the time. The number one killer of children by far is accidents. Car accidents probably kill more children than almost anything else we can measure. We don't react to that by eliminating cars. We recognize that cars' benefit on society are so great that the minor and very small risk that a child still has, even though that is greater than zero and the biggest chance it's going to kill them, we minimize it and we accept it and we try to reduce it as much as possible, but we accept that the societal good outweighs the harm that might be coming there. Whether that's right or wrong is something we should all be debating every day. This is another thing. Is there a greater than zero chance? Possibly, even though I haven't seen it measured. Should you therefore eliminate it? You have to weigh the risks and the benefits and everything else you do and make a personal decision. Lisa Jones asks, what's a good high-fat substitute for whole milk for 1 to 2 year olds who are vegan or allergic to milk? So I know I'm going to irk you here, but I would argue that 1 to 2 year olds are not vegan. They're sort of made vegan. So we'll get past that. If they're allergic to milk, however, and you're looking for a high-fat substitute, there are, I think, other ways to get it. That's a great question. There are probably some formulas or, there are prescribed fat additives that you could probably add to milk. The truth, though, is that by the time you get to 1 to 2 years old, you're starting to transition to, it's especially 2-year-olds, low-fat milk anyway. And so the added fat in the diet is less concerning than it was before. Of course, you can get fat in other ways in the diet, too. You could eat fatty foods, like avocado or something else, which is high in fat. You could also try, I bet that they make whole substitutes, the soy milks or things like that. And I'm sure that there are marketed things which also mimic milk, but are non-fat. But I would, argue that, of course, you could also breastfeed up till 2. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's what a lot of countries, people, and societies do. And when, in fact, that's probably what we were supposed to do from an evolutionary standpoint. And that is why, breastfeeding is often recommended well past 1 year of age. And so you could also, the formula is good up until 1. And other things as well. But I get where you're coming from. If you morally don't want to drink cow's milk and you don't want your children to drink cow's milk and you want to find another substitute, I would talk to your physician. I'm sure that there are other options available. I'm sure that there are probably marketed options available. Andy Lowe asks, in your opinion, which country has the best healthcare system? I get this question a lot, and I wish I had a great answer for you. Because different healthcare systems are good at different things. Some are really good at access, as we've talked about. Some are really good at quality. Some are really cheap, and you're trying to hit the sweet spot of all three. But if you're asking me, and of course, which one you think is best should be, of course, dependent upon which of those things you value. I don't mind an expensive healthcare system that provides a fairly large amount of choice and has great quality. When I tell you that that's what I prefer, France is probably my pick. Huge social safety net. Their version of Social Security provides pretty comprehensive benefits to all of its citizens. Most people also buy private insurance, which provides some more options on top of that. Huge amount of access, lots of choice, pretty darn good quality, and it's also on the expensive end. With the exception of the United States, one of the most expensive healthcare systems out there. But that's me. Other people want really cheap. Other people want pure universal access where everybody's getting the same thing. They think the social justice aspects are the most important. Other people think quality should be number one. Whatever your choice is, that's how you choose it. That's why I would probably say France. But, I could have a robust argument and be convinced otherwise on different aspects. Jay Fensom says, "Good day, sir," and a good day to you too. What are the differences between a DO and an MD? Did you ever consider doing a DO instead? Is there any evidence for DO-based practices? So doctors of osteopathy are slightly different. Their medical schools emphasize training in primary care for the most part. They sort of practice more of a holistic, whole person approach. And also try, instead of just treating symptoms or illnesses, they're supposed to think about more the body as a whole. In the old days, they were also more related to bone health. I think that's where the osteopathy comes from. These days, however, the differences are not as great as they used to be. Much of the curriculum is the same, and everyone, once they graduate school, DO or MD, funnels into the same residency program. So I trained with some DOs who especially were becoming family practitioners and were doing residencies or doing rotations in my pediatrics program. I did not consider going to a doctor's osteopathy school. So for a couple reasons. The biggest one being I wasn't sure I wanted to do primary care. In fact, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And given that that they focus very much on primary and holistic care, that was not as much in my wheelhouse or what I wanted to do. Secondly, I had an inkling that I might want to do research or things like that. And in that case, I thought the medical school training would be more appropriate to what I wanted to do for a living. Plus, it was, it's one of those things where it's just, my dad was a doctor, and, when I was in college, it sort of seemed like everybody was going to medical school. And I'll be honest, I just sort of went with the flow in that respect as well. That being said, it's very unlikely that which of your which primary care docs are MDs or DOs for the most part. At a certain point, it all becomes hazy and moot. No one knows where when I go to work every day. No one knows where I went to medical school. Nobody knows. Some might know where I went to residency, and that's only my colleagues. My patients have no idea what medical school I went to. No idea where I went to residency. Almost none of them have any idea that I'm a health services researcher. They just know that I'm Dr. Carroll and I'm a pediatrician. And at the end, most of, I would say, pediatricians sort of wind up in that kind of place. So if you're asking for evidence, I don't think that there's any solid evidence that DOs or MDs necessarily in outcomes that we care about function quite differently. Sometimes they will control for that in certain survey studies or in certain studies when they look at how doctors practice. But for the most part, I don't think. Now, you will hear a lot of people with prejudices who will say, DOs are necessarily inferior to MDs. And I'm not getting into that because, of course, that's not based on research. That's often based on anecdote, and it's not even worth our discussing. Runic asks, as a mildly underweight person trying to gain weight by eating more, can eating too much be counterproductive? Should I try eating as many calories as possible or focus on a bigger but balanced diet? Dude, you got to be rare these days. I'm being facetious there. Here's the thing. First of all, when you say mildly underweight, I got to know what that means. Because if you mean the 40th percentile, don't freak out. That. How do you define mildly underweight? Is there a health issue? Is there a problem? Because, these days, one of the biggest problems I run into as a doctor who trains other doctors is that our skew has gotten so far off the scale because, obesity and overweight are so prevalent that often when my residents or even medical students see patients that I would categorize as totally normal and healthy, they think they're underweight because they're so conditioned to children who look heavier that they think that children are not heavy enough. And we got to stop that. 10% of children by definition should be at the 10th percentile. more, half of children theoretically should be below the 50th percentile. That is not the case in the United States of America or in many countries these days. And we shouldn't be shifting the window. We should still be talking about where people theoretically should be. And so when you say mildly underweight, I'd want to know specifically what exactly you're talking about, whether you just look thinner than everybody else or thinner than most of the patients your doctor's seeing, or less than. Not everybody's supposed to be at the 50th percentile. Some people are supposed to be below. Some people are supposed to be above. That's the truth. And we shouldn't be trying to hit this arbitrary 50th line or the median. Not everybody's supposed to be the median. So let's start with that. Secondly, if you are having symptoms where you truly are underweight, you should be talking to a medical practitioner. There's the engine again. Because if that is a medical issue causing you physical problems, you probably need to be talking to somebody about fixing it and not just sort of winging it and getting advice from Healthcare Triage Live. But in general, for people that are feeling that they do need to increase their caloric intake, of course, eating too much can be counterproductive. You could become overweight or obese. That's a real problem. So yes, the answer, quickly is yes. Should you try eating as many calories as possible or focus on a bigger but balanced diet? I would absolutely err on the latter there. It's like, yes, it should always be a nice balanced diet. You've hopefully seen the episode we did on our My Food recommendations. I'd encourage you to watch it. But it's always permissible to eat more, to try to as long as you're sticking to the rules, as long as you're not becoming sort of overweight or obese and having medical issues. So I know I'm sort of going in circles and that was a long-winded answer, but that would be the basics of what I would say. Next question. SB Girl 925, is there any credence to the claims that drinking alkaline or ionized water is better for you than tap? No, I know of no evidence that says that's the case. And as always, I sort of, in these cases, revert to sort of evolutionary answers. If there was something we were supposed to be eating or drinking, it's very likely we would already be doing it or have done it in the past because we were obviously, we have evolved and grown in such a way that we adapt to sort of our environment, our diet, and we all need water. I mean, we all came from water. Water is ubiquitous on the planet. We're mostly made of water. Water is what it is. If we truly needed alkaline or ionized water, we would probably already have found a way. In fact, our bodies have probably adapted to whatever water is available freely and easily. So I don't know of any evidence that would say alkaline or ionized water is the way to go. IRL01, why does my pediatrician insist on no egg whites for my 9-month-old? With studies proving allergen avoidance doesn't work and unremarkable family history, what's the point of avoiding egg whites? So most of the time when we're talking about introducing foods to infants, which is your 9-month-old is on the edge of it, there's a couple of reasons we're very specific about it. Most of the time, we're not trying to avoid long-term allergies. We're trying to avoid short-term problems. So the reason we don't start off with steak and hot dogs is not because we're worried about you getting allergic to steak and hot dogs, it's because you could choke as a baby. The reason often that we avoid things like eggs at the beginning is not because we're worried that your child could be one of the few that's severely allergic to eggs, and it is much more dangerous for an infant to have that severe allergic reaction for the first time than for an older child to have that severe allergic reaction for the first time. And so one of the reasons that we give advice about like add in a new food every couple days and one at a time when you're introducing foods is because we want to know, is the baby allergic to it and what can we see? And the reason we avoid eggs is because eggs are one of those foods that have a bad allergy when it sometimes occurs. And you don't want like anaphylaxis in a 6-month-old or even a 9-month-old. You don't want it ever, but most of the time we're avoiding some of those big allergies is we push it to later because we don't want to do it. If your pediatrician, however, is avoiding it because he or she thinks that that's going to prevent longer-term allergies, you're right, the evidence is not showing there. I'm giving your pediatrician the benefit of the doubt and assuming it's for another reason, but you should ask. Ask your pediatrician, why are you giving me that advice? You should ask every time if you have a question. I mean, I'm being sort of flippant, but it's silly for you to save up these questions for Healthcare Triage Live. If you have a question about the way your doctor is treating you or your child, ask them. That's what you're supposed to do. That I'm telling you to do. Next question, Sant, and I'm going to try to speed through a few of these because I notice we're running out of time. Santhoth Bodu, is it harmful or beneficial to eat gold or silver leaf used in garnishing desserts? There's a great David Cross bit about this, where he makes a point of like it's odorless, tasteless, non-nutritive gold. You're basically pooping it out later. It's like the ultimate FU to poor people. But no, there's no beneficial reason to eat gold or silver leaf. It's totally inert. It's just going to pass through. You're making really expensive poop. That's what you're doing. Harmful? Probably not for the same reasons. I mean, I wouldn't want to eat a ton of it. I just don't know what that would do. We're certainly not conducting randomized controlled trials of what it's like to eat solid gold or silver. But, really what you're doing, again, is you're just flushing it down the toilet, literally. Leo DeBroke, how bad is it to take expired medications? Oh, my God. Like that. This is one of those with a lawyer in me. Is like, not even want to touch this one. So here's the bottom line. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't really care about most of the expiration dates on my medicine, if they're in tablet form, certainly. Liquid form, my dad used to make us take like TIMECODE, I think he got from the office, which was like a child cough or cold medicine. And by the time it was so expired when he gave it to us, it would often be like coagulated and taste like it had gone bad. And he still made me take it, and I'm doing all right. So I don't do that to my children, lesson learned, but especially because I don't really use cough or cold medicines these days. So a liquid medication, which theoretically could go bad or do something, probably I'm much more likely to look at the expiration date, especially if it's one of those that has to be refrigerated, because clearly that's not going to last a long time. But something like an over-the-counter pill that's been sitting in my cabinet and is like months past its expiration date, I personally don't really look at that. But I'm not telling you what to do. You should go talk to your doctor. Inorganic vegan, why did you not talk about the antibiotics that go into livestock when talking about antibiotic resistance? So, because we do a health show and not an environmental show, and why there's lots of reasons to talk about the use of antibiotics in livestock as an environmental or big problem. That's not the same as what they're doing to human beings. There's not as much evidence that giving the antibiotics to the livestock themselves is what's causing widespread antibiotic resistance. I guess there is some evidence for that, but it's not huge. Certainly humans using antibiotics themselves is a much bigger problem. And so there are lots of things sometimes that we don't discuss that you would like to hear about. Like when we do organic versus conventional food, a lot of you get angry that I don't address the environmental issues. That's because I'm not doing an environmental show. And I would encourage other shows to do that topic. Harlow Locke, what behaviors, if any, have been shown to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's? It's a great, great question. I wish we had more. We just, in fact, Healthcare Triage News, we just taped it because we just talked about some new studies about physical activity and supplements and whether or not they will prevent Alzheimer's or progression. And tune in Friday to find out. We should maybe do a whole episode on this. I'll look and see if there's a good way to do that. Diego Derman, is napping healthy? For many people, yes. For a lot. In fact, there have been some pretty good studies that show that it has beneficial effects, especially for people who are sleep deprived and who work in settings or jobs that require them to go long times without sleep. So the short answer would be yes. The longer answer is like almost no society induces or allows it in any good way. Jesse Maxon, depression and other mental disorders run in our family. What can be done to minimize the impacts of these disorders in children? Preventing this, I'm not even sure. I would say probably your best bet is, be on the watch for it and, think about it, talk about it with your children and your health professionals and, try to get on it as soon as you see it. That's probably the best you can do to be more aware and to sort of up your threshold for screening and diagnosis. Chandramuli Rantham, physicians I've talked to are strongly against using informatics tools in medicine, such as decision support systems. Do you have insight into why they believe this and what do you believe about this? You're in my wheelhouse. My whole research career has been devoted to trying to get physicians to use clinical decision support. Almost every large grant I've gotten has been for that. We build information systems and try to convince physicians to use clinical decision support. They don't like it. There's a host of reasons why. They don't like being told what to do. They feel it's removing their autonomy. They hate EHRs in general a lot of the time because they feel they make their practice inefficient. There's a host of reasons. We wrote a paper years ago. You could look up it's the Proceedings of the American Medical Informatics Association. The title of it was "You Can Lead a Horse to Water." which made the physicians that we were studying very angry at us. I didn't write I was not the first author. I didn't come up with the title. Regardless, go read it. I think it's pretty much freely available. And if you can't find it, email or tweet at me and I will send it to you. But it talks about, the problems of getting physicians to use clinical decision support, even when you make it as easy as possible. And last question. Wow. Chilaba Verite. I've seen discussions about cortisol production during exercise. Is there a level of physical activity where there should be concerns about generating too much cortisol, thus stressing out the body? I'm sure the answer to that is yes. I'm sure it's an incredibly huge amount of exercise that probably would be unhealthy for you in general. So for the vast majority of people who are exercising, this isn't really a concern for most people, especially since the amount of physical exercise you need to achieve health benefits is much less than people think. Not this week's video, but last week's Healthcare Triage on Monday was specifically about the benefits of exercise and how much you need. I encourage you to go watch it. And that'll do it. Thank you so much for watching. Check out the Reddit page, reddit.com/r/HC Triage, which now I've got. Facebook.com/Healthcare Triage. Consider, helping support the show. Patreon.com/Healthcare Triage. Healthcare Triage will always be free, as is this live show. But your help can make the show better. We keep talking about some things we'd like to do, like the new set, but we'd like to go on the road. We'd like to do all kinds of new episodes. Your Patreon perks, you're not patronizing. Terrible. I'm running out of steam. Your being a patron of the show helps us to do all of those kinds of fun things. And we really do appreciate it. Tune into Healthcare Triage News on Friday. Tune into Healthcare Triage on Monday. It's going to be another great episode. And I think we're probably not doing a live show next week because I got to travel. But otherwise, we'll be back the week after that. Thanks for watching.